Hello everyone and welcome back to Sketching with Shaw. Today we're looking at The Art of Figure Drawing for Beginners by Gecko Keck. And if we open our book here, here's our table of contents. So I'm actually going to be breaking today's review into 3 different videos. The first video in the review series is going to be on the figure drawing portion. The second video is going to be on the anatomy portion. And the third video is going to be on the animals and objects portion. Here at the very beginning, we got a nice little message from the author and artist of the book, Gecko. Chapter 1, Getting Started. Alright, as we get into it, it talks about the materials and tools used on the left page over here. An art mannequin, drawing paper, drawing pencils 2H, HB, B, and 4B, but really you can use whatever pencils you have. Rubber eraser, pencil sharpener, a solid surface on which to draw, a ruler, ballpoint pen, fine liner, a compass, and digital camera and image editing software, but those 2 are optional. And over on page 11 it talks about basic techniques and stuff like that. So we have different examples of hatching. I personally like the second 2 options more than the first one. As you see, it's a continuous up and down motion on this one, but these ones are just straight lines back and forth. These ones are a lot cleaner in my opinion than the top one. That's why I prefer these 2. If we look down here at the bottom, these are also hatchings, but they're wrapping around the object, so they ain't just laying flat. You can see how it kind of curves around the ball. And I'm not going to be going through every single page in this book, but I'm going to try to do my best to cover as much as possible. On this page, it's talking about working with mannequins that you have. I have one of these in my setup room. Some people say they're useful, some others don't like them. I personally think they're kind of useful for learning the basic shapes or just getting lighting. And now we're getting a little bit into proportions. If we look right here on these 2 figure drawings on the left, each one of these lines indicates a head length. So you got this much for the head, and then as you see, we got 7 spaces. And usually, the figure drawings are usually 7 or 8 heads tall, depending. And if we look at the right example over here, you can see the arms is divided into 2 equal parts. The top half and the bottom half, and they're both the same length. And if we look at the legs, they are also broke up into 2 halves, also of equal length. You see the knee is right here in the middle, as well as the elbow would be right in the middle. You don't want the top half being, let's say, 3/4 long, and the bottom half only being 1/4 long. You want them half and half. And over here on the left page, it's breaking down the mannequin and telling you which part is which I think that's kind of understandable. You know, this is the head, torsos, upper arm, the wrist, the hands, pelvis, the hips, thighs, knees, lower leg, ankles, feet. Pretty basic stuff so far. A few different practice exercises. I personally like to practice like this over here on the right, learning how to draw the shapes. I would recommend doing this first before trying this exercise. And this exercise says, try drawing a chain of arms, joints, and heads all in a line. And then once you master that, try this exercise where you do the same thing, but you make the cylinders more like arms and legs. So you see the thickness is kind of going from skinny to fatter back to skinny, so it has variation. It's going to help you learn the forms a lot faster. Alright, I got me a little clip here to help me hold my pages down. These pages is all about developing an art style, and as we see right here, this little artist tip, it says, finding your art style is not usually a conscious decision. Instead, it's the result of many experiments. Your style comes from within. By experimenting with different materials, drawing speeds, and pressure, your own style will slowly be revealed. And I myself can also agree with that. The more you draw, the more you're going to experiment and try out different things. Some things you're going to like and some things you're not going to like. Alright, so our next page here is all about lights and shadows. I have a whole video about this, so I'm not going to stick too long on this portion. But it is worth learning. It's something you're going to have to learn if you're going to want to get good at drawing. As we see off to the left over here, we have different demonstrations of where the light can be. So we have an example from above lighting, diagonal lighting off to the left, diagonal bottom lighting, and front-on lighting. And if you have yourself a mannequin, you can pose it on your desk like this, and then hit it with a desk lamp or any other light source that you have, and it will show you where all your shadows are going to land depending on how the light is going to be hitting it. Stick figure drawings. A little bit of a tongue twister there. But this is a great way of learning figure drawing when you're first starting out, because you ain't focusing so much on the shapes, but you're just trying to get something that looks fairly human and fairly proportionate. The artist tip right here says in stick figures, it's important to draw the joints as spheres, just as you would with a complicated mannequin. The spheres are connected by the lines representing the limbs, while the spine is indicated with a simple line down the center. So if we look at some of these examples off down to the bottom left here, you see it's mostly just lines and spheres. The spheres being most of the joints or the main head or pelvis. And then the spine, shoulder line, arms and legs is all just straight lines. And once again, we see this is broke down into 7 heads tall, while this one is only 5 heads tall. And if we look off to the right over here, this is a lot more examples of stick figures in motion, which I might say is one of the best ways to learn figure drawing because it's fast, it's efficient, and you can kind of do it anywhere. So if you're sitting in a doctor's office waiting for an appointment or something like that, you whip you out a little sketchbook, draw you a little figure every now and then. These little poses, they're kind of easy to draw since you ain't drawing the main shapes. And eventually you're going to start seeing progression, and you can start making it more and more dynamic as you go on. Chapter 2, Poses and Movements. And as we can see on this page, it's talking about photographic studies of your art figures. So if you take pictures of your mannequins or anything like that, you can save them for later use. And once you have your pictures, you can print them out as light prints, as it's saying right here. Then you can use a pen or pencil to go over them, so you have very accurate studies. And on this page, it's a step-by-step exercise on drawing a standing figure. So they start out with the head, and then the neck, and then they start drawing the torso and the shoulders, then they add on the bicep and lower arm. Then in step 4, they add the legs. In step 5, they add more detail to the arms and legs. And in step 6, they finally finish it out with a finished sketch. And once you graduate from drawing stick figures to mannequins, you then want to graduate from just drawing stiff, normal mannequins to drawing mannequins in different poses and maybe in different motions. So if you see here, we got a few basic standing poses. But if we look down here at the bottom left, they got a little bit more motion to them. Or if we look off to the right over here, these two have a lot more motion to them. So one's laying on his belly while the other one's laying on his back. And they specifically point out the left arm and the right leg right here. They're both foreshortened. And that will be part of perspective, which we'll get into here in a second. Building on the stick figure, dynamic lines. In the enlarged figure on the right, you can see how few lines are needed for a specific pose. The dynamic pencil strokes add movement to the sketch itself. And right here at the bottom, this artist tip right here, it says, watch the people around you. A small notepad and pencil can fit into any pocket, which makes it easy to draw many studies of people while you wait at a bus stop or in a cafe. So that kind of ties back to what I was saying a while ago. You always want to carry a mini sketchbook and pencil with you. And like I said, you can draw your own stick figures, or like this tip says, you can just observe people around you and sketch them while you're waiting. Kind of like sketching a live model, except your model might get up and walk away from you. Turnarounds. Now this is more important for animation or comics, because usually if you're just drawing one static image, they're not going to be turning. There's just going to be one flat image. If we look right here, it says mannequin turnaround. The images below show the turnaround of a mannequin consisting of front view, 3/4 profile, a side, and rear views. Once again, it's important to draw every one of these shapes as you get an understanding of the entire form. Human figure turnarounds. The illustrations on the opposite page show a 360-degree rotation of 2 human forms. The top row of illustrations show fully developed forms based on the mannequin drawings. The bottom row shows the mannequin sketch lines instead of the form, demonstrating each progressive step. So they're pretty much just saying the top one up here is drawn with the mannequin, you just can't see it. The bottom example here is pretty much the exact same turnaround, but you can lightly see the mannequin layer underneath. And just like I said a while ago, once you graduate from stick figures to mannequins, you want to graduate from just mannequins to putting simple movements into your mannequins. The artist tip says, notice how each progressive step doesn't require a complete reworking of the pose. Simple modifications are all that is needed to depict motion, as the proportions of the limbs, head, and body largely stay the same. And if we look over here to the bottom right, you can see what they're talking about. How the arm kind of swings up, but the body and legs kind of stay the same. This leg arches up just a little bit, but most of the motion comes from this arm. You see it moves from down here all the way up here, and in doing so, this arm also kind of lifts up, but the torso and pelvis don't really move at all. And in your movement sequences, you want to think how one piece of the limb is going to interact with another piece of the limb or another body part. So if we look at this example here, we got 5 different poses of the mannequin lifting his arm up. First pose, he's kind of hunched over. Second pose, he's starting to raise his arm. Third one, he is raising his arm. And as he's doing so, you can see in the 4th panel, his back is starting to arch backwards the higher up his arm goes. And then in the 5th one, he's almost completely laying down with his right arm catching him while his left arm is in the air. Here's another great example on the right page of a mannequin sitting up from a laying down pose. And in this example, it shows a more extreme range of motion. So we see the mannequin is doing a backwards handspring, but as you can see, all the limbs stay proportionally the same. They're not growing or shrinking. Then if we look at the example on the bottom, this is another example of a turnaround, but using a mannequin. But this time it's showing more detail. As the mannequin turns around, the head actually gets smaller because the torso is hiding most of it. And then this is chapter 3, the introduction to anatomy. Like I said, this is going to be in the 2nd video. So we're going to skip over this for now and just get back to the figure drawing portion. On to chapter 4, drawing the details. So once you graduate from stick figures to mannequins to motions, you're going to want to start detailing your figures and your mannequins. And that's what this chapter is all about. If we look here, we got some ears and eyes studies along with some noses and mouth studies. And just like every artist, they start out with basic forms before getting more detailed. And once you know how to draw the details like the ears, nose, eyes, and mouth, you got to learn how to place them on your figures and mannequins, which is what these pages are about. And if we look off to our left right here, we can see the head is broken up into 4 different sections. The first section is mainly the hair. The second section is mainly the forehead and the top of the eyes. The third is the bottom of the eyes and the nose. Then the 4th section is the mouth and the chin, which this ain't in the book, but I normally divide it up into 3 portions. So what I normally do is I do from the top of the head to the top of the eyes as 1, then the top of the eyes to the bottom of the nose as 2, then from bottom of the nose to the bottom of the chin as 3. That's how I normally do it. And if you look at the right page right here, this is a turnaround of a head study. And of course, not every head's going to look the same, so you want to play around with different head shapes and faces. And then moving on to hands and feet. If we look down to our bottom left, we have a beginning sketch of a hand, starting out with a circle. Then after you get your circle, for your palm, you're going to want to add lines to indicate where the fingers and thumbs are going to be at. Then after that, you're going to want to thicken those lines up so you have actual fingers and thumbs while breaking each finger and thumb up into multiple sections. The fingers consist of 3 different sections while the thumb consists of 2. Then the 4th step here, it just shows adding more detail in the palm and adding the wrist. If we look off to the right, drawing feet, which drawing hands and feet is usually every artist's kryptonite.
You don't understand. I understand.
But with this book, it will teach you the basics of what you need to know to learn upon and grow your knowledge of drawing feet and hands, along with a bunch of other stuff that we're going to get into. It says practice makes perfect. And boy, if that ain't the truth. But like the book says, as you practice, you will get better. You will see progression. But you will only see progression if you practice. You're not just going to pick up a pencil and be good just because you bought a book that tells you how to draw. You still have to learn to draw. And if you really want to master the craft, the artist tip says, no drawing of hands or feet would be complete without accessories, such as watches, rings, and footwear. If you want to master these topics, spend more time drawing these related objects. And if we look right here, these are a few different examples on how to draw different clothes and folds in clothes. It even gives you an artist tip to put little clothes on your mannequin, so that way you know how they fold or whatnot. If you do have one of these little artist mannequins, Barbie clothes fit almost perfectly on them. Onto perspective, which I also have a video on 1, 2, and 3 point perspective up on the channel. So once again, I'm not going to be spending too much time into this portion, but once again, it's another great thing you're going to want to learn if you're going to want to get good at art or comics or animation or anything like that. But it gives an example of someone lying down, standing up, sitting on maybe a chair or something. And then this example right here is great because it shows 3 examples in one, all using pretty much the same objects. And perspective is really good for drawing buildings or something like that. That's mainly what you're going to be using it for. But as these examples show, you can also use perspective to fit your characters into your drawings. And if we look off to the left here, it shows an example of bird's eye view, worm eye view, and direct overview. And in my video, I also talk about bird's eye view and worm's eye view, even though I think I call it ant's eye view in my video. But if you want to learn more about perspective, I recommend going to watch that video. It will help you a lot. But back to the book review. Chapter 5, Figure Drawing Step by Step. We see here they started out with the basic forms, like the stick figure in the beginning, so circle joints, straight lines for the arms and legs. Second step, they thickened up the arms and legs to more match the head and torso. Third step, they started defining the actual shape of the human form. Then in the fourth step, you can see they got rid of all their grid lines and started adding the shading and details for a finished figure drawing. And these are more example on how the clothes and folds are going to fall on your mannequins or figure drawings. As we see in this example, everything's kind of pinched up here in the top left, so everything kind of flows down a little bit. Just like right here, everything comes to this pinch point, which all the lines kind of converge to the pinch point. Then if we look at these two examples, all of the buttons are kind of acting as pinch points. So you see all these folds on the left and right are kind of wanting to go towards each one of the buttons in the middle, along with this example you see right here. But this example is great because it shows an up close picture right here. As you see the bump of the folds, you also see the lines of the shirt follow the bump of the folds. It's going to give your form a lot more 3D aspect instead of just being flat on the page. Chapter 6, Dynamic Motion. There was a little note in the book at the beginning there that said drawing athletes or people in sports is a good way of learning motion and figure drawing. And then you also want to study different sports. You don't want to study the same sport over and over, because if you're doing that, usually they're going to be doing the same kind of poses over and over. So if we see right here on these two pages, there's actually a bunch of different examples. And as you see, each pose is vastly different than the last. And it says, artist tip, a mannequin is helpful for reproducing and studying a wide variety of movements and poses such as dancing or jumping. Position the mannequin in as many active poses as possible and create drawing studies of each. And this book is filled with tons of different figures and tons of different poses. So you're going to be able to learn and study a lot from this book. Here we see more examples of different sports. So we got golf, tennis, and volleyball, along with baseball and hockey. Chapter 7, People with Animals and Objects, which, like I said in the beginning, this is going to be the third video I do. So we're not going to get into this portion just yet in this video. In this first example here, we have a woman with a yoga ball. And as we see on the left page here, she has the yoga ball in many different positions. So you got many different poses and studies to do. Here's a study of a couple with a stroller. So you see in step 1, they have their basic figure drawing with just the joints and lines. Then they thicken it up. And then in step 3, they add their details on top of their mannequins. And on to chapter 8, drawing people in groups. It says joining figures. Drawing joined figures is similar to drawing single figures. Start with the basic shapes and the desired poses. Adding the contour lines helps work out the final shapes of the finished drawing. And we have another artist tip down here at the bottom. It says, the figures on this page present as a single unit, which is how they were initially drawn. However, if you are finding this task difficult in the beginning, try drawing one figure first, place a clean sheet of paper over the first drawing, and then lightly sketch in the second figure in the desired area. Secure the two drawings in place, and then add another new sheet of paper on top of those two, and then trace both drawings onto a new piece of paper, giving you both ones joined together. I'm not going to lie, that's a very useful tip. I use that to do this drawing right here. I didn't know how some of the characters would scale up to some of the other cartoon characters, so I drew some first and then took pieces of paper and used the light box to shine through to draw new ones on the new pieces of paper. And then once I had all the characters drew out, like I said, I went back with the main piece of paper over it and sketched all the characters together. And here in this example, they show different shapes and sizes. So they got people standing, some are hunched over, some are crouched. And then in this example, they show maybe one's a kid and the other one's a parent. So obviously one's going to be taller than the other. And here's more examples of drawing people in groups. And just like all the other drawings, you're going to want to start out with your basic forms, so your circle joints and your line arms and legs, before moving on to more detailed mannequins, and then adding your details onto your mannequins, such as this, before adding your shading and your highlights to get your finished drawing. Chapter 9, Drawing Eclectic Figures. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Hopefully I am. Question mark. But once you learn everything in all the other chapters, you can start using what you've learned to draw more unique characters for what maybe you want to draw. And if we look at this page, patterns and textures, these are great references for drawing many different patterns and textures. And maybe you don't want to draw realistically, and that's okay, because everything you've learned can be used for fantasy and other forms of drawing, like comics. So we see here, he starts out with his mannequin, but on top of that, there's a drawing of a vampire, drawing of Santa Claus, here's a drawing of a manga boy and a manga girl, and then even a drawing of a crazy looking robot over here. But you can see they all use the same template of the mannequin. Even this crazy looking robot, you can see the mannequin lines up here in the head and in the shoulder and arms and then to the legs. But it's stylized. Well, that pretty much sums up today's video and review. This is an amazing book for learning how to draw figure drawings for beginners or pro artists if you just want to expand your horizon and learn a little bit more. This is a great tool to do so. If you learned or used anything from today's video, tell me about it in the comments, or if you have any art you want to share with me, I'd love to see it over on my Instagram, where I'll like it and share it to my page. But y'all already know, like, comment, subscribe, share with a friend, and I'll see you next week.